across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? From the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Tonight of all nights, get a piece of paper, get a pen, or write it on your phone. This number, 0844 499 1000, because we're going to have a rumble tonight. Even if my interlocutors haven't showed up for the fight. That won't stop me, not on the mother of all talk shows.
Big Georgie Galloway's back on the radio!
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio.
It ended in the grotesque chaos of the Labour Party. A Labour Party scuttling from court to court in taxis to rob 130,000 of their own members of their rights, using the members' money in the High Court to stop the members from voting. A decision that was taken not by the Labour Party, not even by the National Executive of the Labour Party. A decision taken behind closed doors by a tiny clique, operated, and I use this word advisedly, operated by the party's own deputy leader, Tom Watson. A tiny clique from the Blair-Brown era in a last-gasp effort to try and stop Jeremy Corbyn from winning a second landslide victory in the Labour leadership contest, the second landslide victory in 2 consecutive summers. It is beneath contempt, as Owen Jones just opined, a party going to court to disenfranchise tens of thousands of its own members can never be a good look. But hey, what does Tom Watson care about looks? What does Tom Watson care about anything other than this obsessive determination to deny Labour members their rights and to defy the decision taken not 1 year ago to give Corbyn a chance, after the Blairs and the Browns had failed? Why not give Corbyn a chance? That's all that those of us who support Jeremy Corbyn ask, that he be given the chance to serve. And if all these Blair and Brownites in that clique had given Corbyn a single day of peace to do the job 60% of the members elected him to do, then Labour would be in a much stronger place today. But they didn't. Now, at this moment in time, constituency Labour parties are nominating their candidate for the leadership. Corbyn is more than 200 constituencies ahead of the second-placed option, which is neutrality. In other words, Owen Smith is third in a 2-horse race. And so, what's it all for? It cannot possibly affect the outcome apart from anything else. A very large number of the 130,000 people were forced in an act of coercion to pony up £25 in order to secure their vote. So this argument isn't about whether Johnny-come-latelys should be allowed to vote or not. It's about whether Johnny-come-latelys should be allowed to vote for the normal membership fee, because there's no objection to them voting if they pay £25 on top of the normal fee. And many of them did. So, Corbyn's going to win a massive victory. So what is all this for? Well, I'll tell you. It has to be a precursor to a new phase of the war against Corbyn, against the Labour membership. It cannot be about reducing Corbyn's margin of victory by 2 or 3 or 4 or 5%. It has to be for bigger stakes than that. Otherwise, why would 172 Labour members of Parliament encourage the bitterness, hatred, enmity that the Labour members feel for them tonight? Why would they do that if they were going to go back to normal business once the new leader is elected next month? It has to be about a break of some kind inside the Labour Party. Now, the Times newspaper, that great friend of Labour, that great friend of the working class, had a lead editorial 2 mornings ago. No, I beg your pardon. Yes, Wednesday morning, in which they encouraged the 172 Labour rebel MPs to have courage and to break away as a SDP 2.0. For younger listeners, the SDP were led by a gang of 4 Labour members of Parliament, and when I look at them now and compare them to the leaders of this coup, I cannot but laugh out loud. I beat one of them, Roy Jenkins. I knocked him out of Parliament. He was the most senior of that gang of 4 breakaway. He'd been the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He'd been the Home Secretary. He'd been the President of the European Union Commission. And I put him out of Parliament. And his confreres and sister were Shirley Williams, Dr. David Owen, another former Foreign Secretary, and Bill Rogers, a big Labour figure for many decades. That's not anything like the calibre of the people you see on your television screens these days, but their game is the same. The SDP Mark I split the Labour Party and kept Margaret Thatcher in Downing Street for a decade, taking a sufficient proportion of Labour voters as to make a minority Tory government a more or less certainty for a decade. And that's what they're up to again. They are rancid traitors. Traitors to everything they ever claimed that they believed in. So this is Black Friday. This will be remembered in Labour history as Black Friday, a day on which 5 ordinary members and one child, were potentially bankrupted by being awarded costs against them in the High Court of perhaps £60,000. And Tom Watson laughed out loud about it on Twitter. LOL. Well, I think the laugh will be on the other side of the faces of these plotters, of these traitors, because what has been earned this evening is the enmity and bitterness that will see big changes in the Labour Party in years to come. Talking about Tom Watson, I convivially invited him to join me this evening, and I have had a long history of comradely relations with Tom Watson. I've got all our messages on my telephone. Don't worry, Tom. I'm not the sort of man that publishes private messages. But those messages make clear a warm relationship between him and me. So I wanted to talk to him about his cockamamie allegation that there are Trotskyists twisting the arms of ordinary Labour Party members in support of Jeremy Corbyn. Now, Tom, as you know, I'm not in second place to you in my opposition historically to Trotskyists or Trotskyism or Trotsky himself. Quite the opposite, in fact. But there are not 4,000 Trotskyists in the entire islands of the United Kingdom. Not 4,000, and never have been more than 4,000. Labour has 600,000 members. Do you get that number, Tom? 600,000, including the 130,000 you just cheated and rigged out of their rights in the High Court today. The idea that there's some kind of Trotskyite twist going on, like a kind of ultra-left lap dance or an ultra-left line dance where the unwitting stooges are being twisted by a group of men with bad glasses, long coats, and goatee beards, is utterly preposterous and ridiculous. So, Tom, don't think by failing to show up tonight that I'm not going to talk about you, because I have plenty to say about this, about the Duke of Westminster, the new one, the 25-year-old one, the one who won't be paying you any inheritance tax on his £8.3 billion unearned fortune. And I'm going to be talking about the UKIP leadership, the Donkey Derby, some call it, as to who will lead Britain's fourth biggest party over this summer. It's all coming up on the mother of all talk shows.
Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it?
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. Or you can text with the words talk and then your message to 87222. Or you can tweet me at George Galloway or us at Talk Radio. Now, one man who always has the courage to show up, who never fails to step up to the mark, is John Rentoul, a biographer of Tony Blair, a journalist, commentator, columnist on the Independent newspaper, and I'm glad to say he hasn't let us down tonight. John, welcome to the show.
Hello, George.
Hi. Now, Owen Jones made the point earlier that it's never a good look, a party seeking so hard and so expensively to disenfranchise 130,000 of its own members. You agree with that?
No, not at all. I think it's not a good look for a party to be so divided that the two sides take to the courts to try and solve their disputes. But I mean, that is just the situation that the Labour Party finds itself in, because people feel extremely strongly on both sides. But the idea that you should wait 6 months before you get a vote as a Labour Party member is a perfectly reasonable one, and that's what the court ruled today.
Well, of course, they joined when the written material available to them said the opposite. It said if you join, you will have a vote in Labour leadership elections.
Yes, well, obviously you will have, but not necessarily straight away. And
Didn't say that, of course, John.
No, it didn't. It should have had a little asterisk, and it should have said terms and conditions apply. But this is a political party. I mean, they don't always put all the small print on the recruitment literature, and they should have done. But the court case was perfectly clear today. But I mean, Owen Jones is perfectly right that it doesn't look good for the party to be running to the courts. But it didn't look good in the 1980s when Militant went to the court to try and stop them being chucked out for being entryist.
Gosh, I'd forgotten that.
Well, they went to the capitalist court.
The capitalist courts. Now, listen. The undercurrent to today was exactly what you've just done. The spectre of Trotskyism. Tom Watson formed this new dance band called the Trotskyite Twist, and all kinds of wonderful memes are emerging. That's not true, though, is it? 600,000 Labour members. There's not 4,000 Trotskyites in all of Britain.
No, I completely agree with that. But Labour does have a problem with Trotskyist entryism, and it does have a problem with large numbers of Trotskyists who've been dormant for a very long time, see this as their moment, and have flooded back into the party and are taking advantage of naive and idealistic new members and trying to organise them in large numbers behind Jeremy Corbyn.
But if you agree with me that there's not 4,000 of them in the entire country, the use of the word large and flooded is hyperbole by definition.
Well, I don't know how many there are. There are an awful lot of them. I mean, maybe that's just my anecdotal impression, but I mean, it seems like every Trotskyist that I was fighting against in the early 80s in the East London Labour Party, where they were trying to deselect, our excellent local MP Peter Shaw. Every one of them seems to be back in the party now, or trying to get in, and trying to organise large numbers of impressionable followers. And they have to be organised against.
Is that not a bit patronising to the members that they are impressionable followers?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that, obviously there are people who are less well informed about the sort of policy positions that Jeremy Corbyn stands for and the sort of people he's associated with in the past than political obsessives like me, who've been following the Labour Party since 1981 or thereabouts. I mean, I think that's when I first joined the party. I'm not a member now, but I mean that in my youth I was a member of the party, and I've been following it ever since. So obviously I know a lot about Jeremy Corbyn's politics and what he stands for, and I wouldn't, and I don't think it's patronising to say that there are a lot of people who've joined the party who've got no idea what Jeremy Corbyn stands for, but they just see, a decent old man who's never changed his mind about nationalisation, and they think that's, instead of thinking that's just sort of mistaken and wrong, they think that's a sign of authenticity.
Well, I was the sole non-militant member of the Scottish Committee of the Labour Party Young Socialists more than 40 years ago. So
well, you go back even further than I do.
So I know about these Trotskyists, and what I'm saying to you is that your sophisticated, savvy, media-sensitive and Facebook-friendly and Twitter-fired member of the Labour Party today really is not under the sway of a man in bad glasses with a long coat and a goatee beard from more than or almost a century ago. Now, this is just Red Scare, John.
No, it's not. No. I mean, the point is there are a lot of Trotskyists around who've come back into the party, who've started to be active again, who are, I think, taking advantage of people who don't know anything about the history of the Labour Party over the past 3 decades. But I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying that is a fact, and it's up to the centrists in the Labour Party to organise to educate people.
So how's that going? What do you think?
Very badly.
So what happens next? I mean, if it's another hiding that they take, what do they do next?
No, it won't be a hiding. I mean, I don't think Jeremy. Well, I've been stung by making ludicrous predictions about what's going to happen in Labour internal elections before, but I just do think that there are an awful lot of people who voted in good faith for Jeremy Corbyn because they thought he represented something new, and they've been bitterly disappointed with him. I think there are a lot of those people around. I think Jeremy Corbyn's tide has started to ebb back again. And eventually he will be defeated because he's not going to win a general election, and it's just a matter of time. But I mean, it does make me very sad because you and I have been through this all before.
So you think that I am fair from what you say that Corbyn will win with a slightly less impressive majority, but that
possibly he might even increase his majority, but it'll be against a single candidate this time, so it'll look a bit more even. But yeah, Jeremy Corbyn's in favour of annual leadership elections, so he's going to get them.
You think so? So Labour's going to go through this every year?
Yeah, absolutely, because people, as you know, people feel very, very strongly about it. And there are a lot of Labour Party members and MPs who will feel that they cannot go into a general election and tell people in good faith that they ought to vote Labour in order to make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister, because they would rather have Theresa May as Prime Minister. And it's as simple as that. And so,
but do you really think that the Labour members will be sanguine about an annual challenge to Corbyn?
Well, the campaign for Labour Party democracy that Jeremy Corbyn's always been a member of has always been in favour of annual leadership elections. So the left ought to welcome it, but they will eventually lose.
Okay, John, as I said, you never fail to defend your position eloquently and wrongly. Thanks very much, John Rentoul of the Independent newspaper. That's the other side of the story, and we're open always for the other side of the story. It's a pity that more who expound it don't have the courage to come on the show and do it. 0844 499 1000.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
I'm back all right. 0844 499 1000. Now, you heard from John Rentoul the contradictions in the position of the Labour right. They agree that there are actually very few Trotskyists in Britain, yet large numbers of them are flooding into the Labour Party. Even John chuckled at the hyperbole of that. The inherent implausibility of a small number of people manipulating or twisting the will and intent of many hundreds of thousands of people in the biggest Labour Party in its history appears not to in any way pacify them or make them cease that line of argument. It is utterly ridiculous, as any sensible person would know. The relevance of Trotsky to the Labour Party in Britain in 2016 is a risible idea. But we also heard from Tony Blair's Vicar on Earth, John Rentoul, that there are going to be leadership elections every single year until they prevail. Now, Labour members, I predict, will not put up with that situation. And Labour MPs who are bent on such a course of wrecking the country's Labour Party will be deselected. No one will put up with their MP doing this all over again as soon as this contest is over. Let's take a couple of calls. Steve is in Nuneaton. Go ahead, Steve.
Good evening, George. A pleasure to speak to you.
And you, what would you like to say?
Well, I've just heard John Rentoul there. I mean, he's spinning a few Blairy tales, isn't he, with his Reds under the beds business?
Yeah, that's just knockabout, because everybody knows that's nonsense. What I thought was more significant, Steve, was that it starts again the day after conference. He just told us.
Yeah, well, the thing is, John, I heard about that with that apparently leaked paper from Lord Mandelson, and no matter the result of the court case that we've just had, they said they were going to continue this war of attrition against Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell anyway, for as long as it takes. So, it's shocking. I mean, I can't understand the media. Owen Smith had virtually a 10-minute party political broadcast today when they wanted to ask him about the court case. The cameras were conveniently there. I just find it absolutely shocking. 15 minutes last night on Channel 4 News with Reds under the bed and Michael Crick advertising his new book. I just find it absolutely shocking. All I'll say, George, is when a party elite declares war on the majority of its members, that party elite has to go, or the party will perish.
I'm sorry to have to agree with you. Jeremy Corbyn's a very nice person. Yes. Some would say he's quite soft, actually. And some, I think, cannot deny, even his enemies, that he has tried to be as inclusive with these people as he possibly could. He offered them positions, he gave them positions, he took them back when they'd resigned their positions. He's bent over backwards to be accommodating to these people. But if they are declaring perpetual wrecking war inside the Labour Party, rendering it utterly useless for purpose, then he's going to have to get a grip of that situation.
Well, he'll have to make sure there's some retribution. It's the only thing he can do. I mean, the backstabbing, the fabrication of abuse, the smearing of the membership, and this democratically elected leader. How are these people ever going to be trusted by anybody?
Exactly.
They're the perfect example, George, of everything that's wrong with politics.
And do you know what else? I agree. That's a very succinctly put. And here's another one. I hope it's succinct. It is events like today and the cynical abuse of them that we've just heard. It is events like today that made people vote in overwhelming numbers for Jeremy Corbyn in the first place. This is. Oh, I'm sorry, George. I didn't mean to interrupt you. No, go on. I'm asking you. I mean, this kind of rigging, cheating, lying, and abuse of the courts, apart from anything else, is exactly why people said we've had enough of these Blairites.
This is exactly my point. Exactly my point, George. Because let's face it, after the Brexit vote, whichever way you want, the nation was slightly in crisis, and they expected their political parties to be together to do something. Now, I heard it again, I hear it so often, it's so annoying that Labour have gone down in the polls and all this. Labour were ahead in the polls after the Brexit vote.
Yep.
And it's undiscernible to find out.
Corbyn was ahead of the Tories on the day that the coup was mounted.
Yes,
and
he was,
now he's, by the way, this week he's halved the Tory lead, but it's
has.
still 7%. But if these people are going to spend every day of next year like they've spent virtually every day of this year, there's going to be nothing left at the end.
Yeah, well, it makes me wonder whether this scorched earth policy that they seem to be following is because of a split, because you've got to remember, they shouldn't be worrying about Trotskys and a few hundred guys who have no financial backing, no real impetus in the party. They ought to be worrying about the big problem, people like Progress. I mean, if you can remember back to the SDP, it was Lord Sainsbury at finance most of them, and that was a split.
And he's financed most of, and he's financed, he's financed most of this.
Destroy social democracy for decades, George. But
You're
I've
right.
got to be. Sorry.
No,
I'm sorry, George.
You're right,
I'm
and
a bit
you've
passionate
spoken.
because I'm so annoyed by it, you know.
Yeah, no, you've spoken very powerfully, Steve. As always, thanks very much, Steve in Nuneaton. Let me do a couple of the tweets. Koala 1975 says, I want to cancel my Labour membership today. Stopping people voting is not right. Koala, don't do that. This is not the time to leave the Labour Party. This is the time to join it and support Corbyn and bury Blairism and then tramp the dirt down. John Birkdale says, a dark day indeed for UK Labour. And Scouser Lar says, Corbyn will win a landslide majority, regardless of today's judgment. The Labour right wing are pathetic. Pathetic indeed, but we are apoplectic about the pathetic nature of the Labour right.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
0844 499 1000, that's the number to call. Or you can, of course, tweet or text. Let's hear from Callum in Glasgow. Callum, welcome.
Welcome, George.
Go ahead.
I'm just calling in all the news that the party has been banned 130,000 members in this storm of anger that's been generated by party members. And I agree with you with what you've said previously, that party members should not go, that they should stay and they should fight this decision all the way.
Yes, it would be to do Blair's bidding for people now to leave. It would be
Indeed.
Deserting Jeremy Corbyn, leaving him alone to face these people.
Indeed, and this is actually something similar to what happened with Tony Benn and militants in the 80s. And they are trying to paint democratization as infiltration, and that these are troublesome lefties trying to take control of the party. And that, to me, is unacceptable. And it's about time that this type of politics was flushed away.
Callum, thank you very much. An excellent, succinct call from Glasgow. Let's hear from Damien in Brighton. Go ahead, Damien, the legend.
Good evening, George.
Good evening, and good to see you the other night at the film show.
Really, really great film documentary. Really enjoyed it, George.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
George, I'd like to talk about the implications of the appeal court's decision today.
Yes.
Now, as I see it, by overruling Justice Hickenbottom's decision, Lord Justice Beatson, Lady Justice McCaw and Lord Justice Sales have set a quite incredible precedent. Now, I would argue that the precedent that they've set is that it is now possible for any company or organisation to create within their rules, as the Labour Party has done in its rule book under Chapter 4, Clause 2A, and that they're allowed to insert a clause which effectively allows the company or organisation to legally be in breach of contract.
Yeah, I mean, the argument made by Hickenbottom was absolutely clear, and he did say that the Labour National Executive had no hope of winning an appeal. But hey, miraculously today, they won an appeal, creating precisely the precedent that you have cited, namely that you can take someone's money on the basis of a prospectus which you can retrospectively alter in your favour.
And George, I think it bears some thought about the implications of this. Now, I've got to commend Ian McNichol's barrister. He led the judges into a discussion on the merits of the English dictionary, which used up filibustered precious time.
Thousands of pounds worth of time on the issue of defining the word define.
Exactly. Now, it was a poorly examined hearing, and it was a rushed hearing. Now, I think we should just take a step back and actually consider the full implications of this, what I would describe as a bizarre judgment. So let's look at the impact of this decision on, for example, employment law, George. Now, it's now possible by this president for employers to include a caveat which will legally allow them to renege on permanent employment contracts. It is also possible if we look at, for example, tenancy agreements. Landlords will now be able to include a caveat which will allow them to demand rental increases at any time they wish, irrespective of when those periods are set out in the
contract.
Agreement. And as of 3 p.m. today, I don't want to be too dramatic about this, George, but I would say that contract law in the UK, as it is generally accepted by any rational person, has ceased to exist. Now, I think that as this means that contracts as of today are effectively not worth the paper they're written on, quite literally, it's time for the Supreme Court to intervene in this and clear this mess up, George.
Well, yes, but the appeal panel today refused the 5 members plus a child. They refused them the right to appeal to the Supreme Court. So what happens now?
Well, whilst they were refused the right to appeal, they are still able to make an application separately. And I would suggest that anybody in this country who thinks that contracts should be honoured should involve themselves and make a donation to the crowdfunding to support these members being able to vote in this election.
Yeah, I think that's important. They've raised, I think, a significant amount of money, but nothing like what they have now been landed with in costs. And, of course, if they were to take this matter further to the Supreme Court, that will cost them an arm and a leg. So everyone needs to rally round on the crowdfunding.
They do, George. Currently, they've got a liability of 60,000, 35,000 raised so far. But just as a general overview, of course, this is an entirely hollow victory for Ian McNicol.
Totally. It's a Pyrrhic victory.
Entirely, George, because now that Jeremy Corbyn has got a majority on the NEC, Ian McNichol's days are numbered. Tom Watson has expended any political capital that he had left, and so is a lame duck deputy leader. And I think whatever happens in this election, it's looking as if Jeremy will win by quite a large margin. I think the main focus for the party should be to rally behind whoever wins, so we can concentrate on beating the Conservatives in the next general election.
Thank you, Damien, the legend in Brighton. Let's go to another old legend of ours, Ray in Pontypridd. Ray, welcome.
Good evening, George.
Good evening. What do you think?
I'm ashamed of myself, George. I'm really ashamed of myself. I voted for Tom Watson for deputy leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I put to him, I think it was the Syrian vote where he abstained. I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with a few other things, but I thought he's a campaigning MP. He wrote me a long email back. I was surprised. And he convinced me, and I voted for him. Now, I'm really ashamed tonight, George.
Well, I'm equally ashamed because although I had no vote, of course, being expelled, I did exert a lot of arm twisting on my own family. My entire family voted for Tom Watson on my advice, and it was very strong advice. And so if you're ashamed, so am I. Let's equally hang our heads.
In shame.
Yeah.
George, did you think that this ruling today had any chance of succeeding after what the first judge said?
Not at all. You could have knocked me down with a feather.
You can't breach a contract, can you?
Well, as Damien, who sounds as if he knows a thing about the law, it leaves contract law in Britain now in tatters. It means that you, the seller, in this case the Labour Party selling its membership, you, the seller, can retrospectively change the terms of the contract that you have concluded with your buyer. These people bought their Labour Party membership with, in writing, in front of them, a promise that they could vote in leadership elections.
They keep moving the goalpost, George, don't they?
Well, you heard the cynical laugh of John Rentoul who said, yes, well, so they can vote in leadership elections, but not necessarily the next one.
And it patronising people who are voting for Jeremy Corbyn, the way he patronised people, like they're all going to be influenced by these so-called Trotskyists, infiltrators.
It's a long time since I even set eyes on a Trotskyist, never mind heard one of them speak.
Do you know what the odds are for the election, for the Labour election now, George?
No.
1-16 on Jeremy Corbyn, 7-1 Mr. Nobody.
Has he got any Welsh nominations? The way I look at it, he's not getting any honour even in his own land.
But Blaine Gwent. Now, you couldn't get more working class than that, could you?
But it was just the executive that nominated him. The members didn't get a say.
No, that's right. You know, I despair. And last night on the debate...
Well, here, let me tell you this, Ray. Kieran says, I'm hearing rumours that Smith has failed to get the support of his own Pontypridd CLP.
Oh, they've seen sense then, have they?
My goodness, that would be a story, wouldn't it?
Yeah, great.
Look, Ray, thanks very much, pal. Great to hear from you again. I want to squeeze in Scott from Glasgow before the break. Go ahead, Scott.
Hi there, George.
Hi.
It's just a basic point to yourself. You're in the know. But what I was wanting to, I can't realise it. My brain gets scrambled with it. What actually happened between being of the mindset that, right, I'm going to do stuff for the constituents. This is national. This is what I'm going to do. Between that, getting to Westminster, and then all of a sudden, did they get caught up in the machine? Is it money? I don't understand what actually happens to them.
Well,
I don't.
That's a very good.
I can count in one hand, George. I spoke to you before about that. But people to me that stand out. And this is over decades. You know what I mean? The people that stand out. And there's Owen Smith last night. A couple of weeks ago, he used the word radical when he was talking to Jeremy Corbyn, saying, I'm radical as well, Jeremy. He would never have used that word in a million years, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, copying is the biggest form of flattery. Yeah. Then last night I noticed, when they come on to do their debate, no tie. He never had a tie on, and I was like, oh, here we go. It scrambles my brain, George. I mean, to me, Corbyn, he's obviously no messiah, but he's a shining light, you know. A Tony Benn quote for me says it all. It says, first they say you're mad, then they say you're dangerous, then there's a pause, then you can't find anybody that disagrees with you.
Yeah,
you know,
that's right. That's right. Scott, look, let me try and give something of an answer to the point you've made. Okay. Westminster Parliament is a big bubble, and people get into it, and they lose gradually touch with the world outside that bubble. That's what happened over the Iraq War, where we had millions outside in the street that knew this was a very bad idea, but when you stepped through the door into Westminster, overwhelmingly people were persuaded that it was a good idea, and a kind of mass hysteria takes place, and it's a good job, don't forget. They want to keep it. It's a thick carpet and nice upholstery and subsidized life on Mars prices in the bars and the restaurants and so on. So they become like a political caste, separate from the people that they're supposed to represent.
Exactly.
But they're committing suicide, Scott, because if John Rentoul is right, and he's usually right when he comes to telling us the intentions of these friends of his, that they're going to continue, that as soon as Corbyn wins this time, they're going to begin another. It's going to be an annual event, and it's not an event, of course, it's an annual 12 months of attrition. If he's right about that, these people are committing suicide. They won't be MPs for very much longer, because people will not put up with it.
Yeah, exactly. Here's this so-called great country of ours that gave democracy to the world, George.
Yeah. Okay, Scott, look, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks.
Cheers, bye.
Kieran has given us this rumour. I'd like to try and stand it up, if I could, that Smith has failed to get the support of his own Pontypridd constituency. The Order 1814 says, I don't support Corbyn. He is the leader of Labour. People should back him as leader, and all should respect the referendum vote. And Euroman and activist says Labour lost 5 million votes because of Tony Blair. Without Jeremy Corbyn, Labour will become like the Lib Dems with just a handful of MPs. Well, I think you never said a truer word. People are writing in here saying, what is a Trotsky? I'm not sure whether to explain it or not because it's such an absurdity. But he was a Russian with bad glasses, a goatee beard, and a long black coat. And he was last relevant almost 100 years ago, and only then in Russia and other parts of the surrounding European hinterland. He was never relevant in Britain. There has never been any kind of support, significant support for his ideas, of Trotskyist ideas. And in the Labour Party today, there are not more than a handful of Trotskyites. As John Rentoul agreed with me, whilst going on then to use the words, large numbers of Trotskyites flooding into the Labour Party. Even he had the grace to chuckle at that hyperbole.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
A new kind of talk radio. We'll get you talking. Talk radio.
It's the mother of all talk shows with me, George Galloway, every Friday night between 7 and 10. 0844 499 1000. That is the number to call me. We're discussing Labour. We're discussing the Duke of Westminster next.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. If you want to talk about the stitch-up in the High Court, the coup against Corbyn, the Duke of Westminster's very modest tax obligations, or the donkey derby that is the UKIP leadership race.
Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it?
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now, it's a bit unfair of me to call them donkeys because I frankly know none of them or anything about any of them. So there might be a thoroughbred or two in amongst them. It's just that they haven't really shown their class or form yet in the ring. But that might be because Nigel Farage, the outgoing leader of UKIP, has been so absolutely dominant over many years now as the leader of the party that, like the deadly upas tree, nothing could bloom underneath his shade. Well, he's gone now, at least we think he has, and his man, the one he nominated and supported, Stephen Wolfe, as his successor, was ruled out of the race because he was 7 or 8 minutes late with getting his forms in. And he turned out to be forgetful in other regards too. He forgot that he had been convicted of drunk driving when he was running to be the police commissioner. He didn't think that was worthy of mention, and he didn't mention it in his CV for the UKIP leadership either. So he's out, and that leaves a collection of candidates. I'll not trouble you with their names at this stage because, frankly, the names wouldn't mean much to any of you. But one woman, Elizabeth Jones, is trying hard. And if you try hard in politics, sometimes that can go a long way. And she's got the courage to appear here on the mother of all talk shows, and so I welcome her. Elizabeth Jones, welcome to the show.
Welcome to you, George Galloway.
Now, why should people vote for you? Why should UKIP members vote for you?
They should vote for me because I'm a long-standing party member. I have walked the walk and talked the talk. I have contested 11 elections in some of the most anti-UKIP areas you can possibly imagine. In the depths of Lambeth, I've walked around all the Lambeth council estates.
You've done the Lambeth walk.
I've done the Lambeth walk. I've brought the Brexit message to Lambeth. So I've covered a whole multitude of elections. I've done local elections, MP, MEP, and now the big one.
How many have you won?
I have won an internal election for the National Executive Committee. I am one of those people on the National Executive Committee. But I haven't won. Well, I've contributed significantly to, let's say, the 2014 European election success for UKIP. I was third on the London list for that. I did a lot of campaigning for that. I also contributed with regard to the London success we had this year. We got 2 Greater London Assembly members. So my contribution has held. And, of course, the big one, Brexit. My God, I tore a shoulder in my left. I tore a muscle in my left shoulder. There was a huge physical strain, carrying all those leaflets, carrying the bags, walking up and down those steps, meeting all the people. But I've done it, and I have persevered. My running mate is Councillor Lawrence Webb. He is the leader of UKIP over in London Borough of Havering. And between us, we've actually contested 33 elections.
How many has he won?
He did very well. May 2013, he made a huge breakthrough in London, and he won Goucher's. He became the first UKIP councillor in Goucher's, which is a sort of Essex border London council within Havering. He won that, and from that he helped get more UKIP councillors, and now he is the UKIP leader of Havering.
And when you say he's your running mate, Elizabeth,
yes.
Is there a deputy leadership position up for grabs too?
Yes, he's going to be if I win, he'll be my deputy leader. And as I was saying earlier, between us, we added up all the votes we'd actually brought to UKIP, and between us, through our respective campaigns, totaling 33, we have actually scored 100,000 votes plus for UKIP in our trials over the years. So we really have walked the walk. You know, perhaps not in leopard skin shoes like our great Miss Therese May, but we've walked the walk and we've talked the talk for sure.
But
so,
of course,
work, we can put it in.
Yeah, no doubt you've been a prodigious, formidable, indefatigable campaigner and activist. But of course, that's a different thing to winning elections. Your long answer masked, if I may say so, the fact that you've never actually been elected to anything.
I've been elected internally to the National Executive Committee. I'm one of the members of the National Executive Committee of UKIP, of which there has been much controversy in the press recently. But with regard to public elected posts, that is correct. I have not won anything because the vast majority of the elections have taken place within inner London, which is currently a Labour stronghold.
Yeah, sure.
So very, 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 I'm sure you must know there, Mr. Galloway, very, very difficult to break through the stranglehold of Labour in the inner urban areas.
But it can be done, as I'm
it can
a living
be. Keep
testament
banging and banging.
to that.
It can be done.
Now, what are your politics? How do I differentiate you from the other candidates in this race?
Well, I'm very interested in trade. I want to resume our trade diplomacy with Russia, extremely important. Trade brings peace. In fact, Nigel Farage, I would say, was probably about the first public figure, apart from your good self, who, I think it's about 2012, was saying that we need to love bomb Iran. Why on earth are we having trade sanctions against Iran? Let's love bomb Iran, trade with Iran, have increased trade coming our way and their way, and that will raise the living standards in Iran and help everyone. So he was one of the first people to say, let's lift the trade sanctions on Iran in about 2012. So very keen on trade. I'm very keen on world peace, totally opposed to military adventurism and military interventionism. Domestically, of course, the big issue for UKIP, and I think nationally, whether we like it or not, is immigration. That's brought about, I would say, the Brexit vote in the north of England. And one of my platform policies would be to try and bring about zero net migration. So the numbers of people migrating out of the country will balance those migrating in. And I think we need to focus perhaps on sham marriages. I would want to bring in a law to make immigration marriage fraud a criminal offence. Now, I am a family solicitor by day, and I do come across many people who have been hoodwinked, tricked by immigration marriage, and it does bring a lot of heartache. It's unnecessary. It brings unnecessary burden onto the country and the state, so make that a criminal offence. Also, consider reintroducing the primary purpose rule for marriages, so when people come from abroad to meet their spouse or a prospective spouse in this country, they have to show that the primary purpose of being here is the marriage, not residency. Also, another thing to consider would be external refugee settlements. The US Centre of Immigration Studies has calculated that for us in the UK to resettle about 20,000 of the Syrian refugees costs about 30,000 per refugee, whereas if these refugees were resettled, perhaps in Jordan, Turkey, or wherever, but Egypt, the cost would be significantly less, and in fact, about 18 times more people could be protected within their own home environment without having to experience the culture shock of entering cold, grey Northern Europe. So also, I'm also concerned economically about the country. I want to bring in a policy whereby we balance the budget. Every 2 years, there will be a legal requirement for the government to balance the budget because the deficit's getting out of control. It's adding to the national debt. And, of course, it means that it's biting into everyone's future prosperity. It's having a big impact on our housing market, and it's got to be rejigged.
So, in other words, you're a right-wing fanatic, Elizabeth.
If you like to call me that, why not?
I certainly do. I mean, as a manifesto, that was raving bonkers. Why, for example, would net nil immigration be remotely economically successful or the right thing to do? That would mean that a company that needed a worker, a specialist, a technician, a highly trained operative would not be able to bring that worker in if it breached your net nil migration quota.
I'm sure there'll be a way around that. We'll have a point system as well. Of course, the superstars are always welcome wherever they go. That's part of an international community of highly skilled professional experts. They will always be welcome. It's just to balance out so that we can calculate and work out the strain on resources, the strain on the NHS, school spaces, and on road space as well, and on our drainage system. All this needs to be calculated and worked out in advance so we can probably plan. Whereas, unfortunately, we're still in the EU and we're still, therefore, subject to the EU freedom of movement, which has brought a certain level of chaos to this country.
OK, Elizabeth, you put your points over very powerfully. It's all madness to me, but maybe the UKIP members will find it fetching. Let's see. Elizabeth Jones, thanks very much for showing us your leadership credentials. She's fought 11 elections and never won any, and doesn't wear leopard skin heels, and could be described as extreme on matters of culture, other cultures, and other immigrants from other countries. And she wants to settle our refugees in Jordan or in Turkey, where, of course, there are already many millions of such refugees. So that's what you get if you are in UKIP. At least she's one of them. The other one, that Duffy, she's going around trying to pull the headscarves off Muslim women in Britain, even if they were born and raised here. So maybe Elizabeth's the Liberal in this contest. Who knows? Now, I can tell you that Kieran's rumour was wrong and that Pontypridd constituency Labour Party did nominate Owen Smith, their Member of Parliament, by 74 votes to 27. Let me do a couple of tweets if I can. David says, is this the day democracy died in the Labour Party? No, David, it's just a setback. It's a shameful one. It's a dark day, but it's by no means the day that democracy died in the Labour Party. Call Ain Now says, it's obscene, George. Tom Watson, the smug Machiavellian. I hope when Corbyn wins, he's cut from the herd. That's an interesting phrase. Ms. Mint says, how can you support him when he would campaign to halt Brexit and keep us in the EU if he ever got power? This is a reference to the very strange idea of Owen Smith not to accept the decision of the British people in the EU referendum. He thinks that's a good look. He thinks that makes him more electable, but certainly not for me. Well, time for some capitalist messages, I think.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Blimey, I'd forgotten about him. Donald Trump. We're so caught up in all this skullduggery and chicanery here. What about what's happening over there? We may turn to that later. 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call to join the argument, to join the great debate. Let's hear from Lane in County Durham. Lane, welcome.
How are you doing, man?
I'm doing fine. Good to hear from you. What do you think?
I'm going to have a bit of a rant.
Go on.
Because Labour, they're being very, very stupid at the moment, and it's not Machiavellian, whatever, yeah, it's just flat out stupid. Especially regarding the North. During Thatcher, when the whole of the mining industry was destroyed, the ships, all of that was destroyed, Tony Blair basically promised us the world and went, oh, well, yeah, we'll do this, we'll invest, we'll build everything up. And basically, they replaced major industry with call centres. So what you had, I live in a mining town called Seaham, and Ramsay MacDonald was once our...
He was, indeed.
MP.
And Tony Blair was not far away.
Yet he never went to the Durham Big Meeting. That's another story. But what they did during the 90s, like in the likes of Seaham, people were just, we've got to vote Labour in because the Tories have been a nightmare. They've killed us. Because there's a distance with Westminster where they don't understand the physical reality of how things affect people. And I've seen in this town, I've seen families hit the wall. I've known men kill themselves because they felt worthless. They didn't feel any place in society. Because I know the mining industry was dirty and it was hard, and everyone in the Seaham said, I wouldn't send my son down the mine. The thing is, when you were working there, you were proud because, albeit a dirty, awful job, you were providing massive service to the country. You fueled the country. You kept the country alive. You provided everything the country needed for electricity. Without electricity, you wouldn't have had any water, gas infrastructure being piped around. We relied on coal. So Blair, as I say, once Thatcher destroyed the industries and planted Nissan, which is like the amount of people who work in Nissan, you could have that in one pit. Mm-hmm. And like in Seaham alone, it's only a small town. We have 4 mines. It's a small town with 4 mines, and all of those people were disenfranchised. What's happened? It's a Labour safehold. So I think what's happened is, over time, New Labour, and to a lesser extent, Miliband's lot, they just parked the North East. Like, they'll always vote for us.
Yeah. Took you for granted.
They're safe. What's happened is, though, and I think we're definitely still a safe Labour area, but UKIP, now, they're as potty as a child's toilet factory. Just potty. But they're very good. They exploited that unhappiness with Westminster and being parked. Mm-hmm. And they do what I've not seen Labour do this for years. In this small town, they go on the streets. They put the legwork in. Mm-hmm. They go into shops. How are you doing, Mrs. Blah blah blah? How's trade going? How's this? It's the old things in these areas still work. It's the personal contact.
And you don't think that Farage going will effectively render UKIP useless?
I hope they do, personally, but I'm not sure because the trouble is there's a Labour at the moment. They've used the whole EU referendum thing it's a total smoke cloud, because I was a heavy Remainer, a total Remainer, and I live in a place where overwhelmingly people voted out.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people who voted for the first time ever to vote out.
Mm-hmm.
And when asked about Europe, they knew nothing about Europe. Because a lot of the vote on Brexit was not about Europe.
No.
Especially up here. It was about, you lot need to listen to us up here, and they didn't. So
Quite
what's happened now with Corbyn, a lot of people up here love Corbyn. Because they see him as saying, at last, someone in Labour is actually thinking about us.
Good point. Good point.
And they're shooting themselves in the foot. I know you had Jenny Chapman on last week. And
Yeah.
I had a very respectful, nice Twitter conversation with her. But she was failing to grasp everything I was saying. It was just, the EU invested lots in it. And I was like, I'm not talking about the EU. What happened with EU money? EU spent a lot of money regenerating Seaham, County Durham, the North East. A lot of money. Westminster didn't. It was part of that parking mentality. They went, all right, we'll give them that Euro money, keep them happy. We'll spend money chasing Tory votes. We'll build up infrastructure in London. We'll take over London. And they just left the North East.
Okay, look, Lynn, I've given you a good space for your rant, and it's been a powerful one. Thanks very much for calling. But I need to go to Wigan and talk with Peter.
Yeah, hi, George.
Go on yourself, Peter.
Yeah, congratulations to all the good stuff that you're doing and supporting Palestine and opposing war in the Middle East and everything else.
Thank you.
I won't dwell on that. I want to talk about, first of all, Elizabeth Jones of UKIP.
Yes.
She's brilliant. She talks the talk, she walks the walk, until she gets onto asylum seekers. And she wants them to be taken in by Jordan and Iraq, presumably, and all those countries that have been bombed to smithereens by the UK and NATO and America.
And still being bombed.
And still being bombed. And what I want to say is, why don't UKIP face up and say, we caused all the problems there, not we, not you and me, because we opposed it, but the British government, and we should be taking in as many asylum seekers as necessary into the UK. Welcome them with open arms. I remember my local MP, Andy Burnham, saying when he was trying to become the leader of the Labour Party, I will have a family of Syrian asylum seekers in my house.
Oh, did he? I didn't remember that. I remember Yvette Cooper said that, yeah.
Did. I've got it in black and white. And I'm
did that ever happen?
I'm still waiting to see that family of asylum seekers in his house. It's only half a mile from where I live, and I've not seen any Syrians in Goulburn. And anyway, I just thought I'd...
No, that's a very, very good point.
And the talk,
yeah,
it's crap.
Well,
now,
she was all right until she got...
about the traitors in the Labour Party.
Yes.
When Jeremy Corbyn was elected, let me just tell you, by the way, unlike Elizabeth Jones, I have walked the walk and talked the talk. I stood as... I formed my own party in 2002, Community Action Party. That's not a plug, by the way. I don't care. I supported your party, the Respect Party, also, but you didn't have any candidates here. But within the space of 2 years, I overturned 18 Labour councillors and got 18 Community Action Party councillors elected.
Well, now that is impressive.
Well, a lot of people don't, it's not widely publicised, but the Labour Party put any amount of money to get rid of me, and they eventually got rid of me in 2008. Well, that's all right, I don't care, because I'm not interested in political power, but I made the point that we could defeat these people, and my platform was anti-racist, pro-refugee, anti-Iraq war. And we still got 18 councillors elected in Wigan in the space of just 2 years. But under the Labour hierarchy in Wigan, which I would call Stalinist, if not Blairites, they are not socialists at all. They are totally self-serving opportunists, lining their own pockets. And They spared no expense to get rid of me. But I'm still here, as you can hear.
You're still here and you're still alive and
Still
kicking
shouting
on the
loud
radio.
and clear, supporting Palestine, supporting the people of Iraq, Syria, and
Amazing.
Even Iran for all their faults.
Amazing. The voice from Wigan of Peter. Thanks, Peter, for that tour de horizon, as we say in Wigan. Colin MacDonald says, I don't have a great deal of money, but I'll gladly give towards the famous Fives costs. I feel saddened by this. This is a reference to the legal costs that have now been landed on the 5 Labour members plus a child of more than £60,000. The order says since he became leader, there has been a plot to get rid of him. Hillary, Ben and others. And Mike says, instead of the damage and self-interest agendas which have set the Labour Party back years and opened the door for Thatcherism. And let me see if there's any others there. We're talking about the UKIP leadership race. We're talking about the Labour leadership race. And we're going to be talking, I promise you, about the Duke of Westminster, 25, single, and worth £8.3 billion.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
We've been talking about the dreadful event in the High Court today when 3 appeal judges overturned a decision earlier in the week of a High Court judge which he had said would have no chance of success at appeal. Well, it turned out that he was wrong, and the 3 High Court judges found in favour of a Labour Party spending its members' money trying to stop its members from voting in an election. It was pure ballot rigging. Leave aside the devastation it has caused to contract law, which is in tatters now, as Damien and Brighton pointed out most eloquently earlier. Leave that aside. That's a matter for the law to resolve. This was pure ballot rigging. Gerrymandered, ballot rigged, with a covert and then overt attempt by members of Parliament to overthrow the elected leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. No more, no less. And moreover, it's going to start again the day after Corbyn is re-elected next month. We know that because Tony Blair's vicar on earth, John Rentoul, his voice in Fleet Street, told us so. Well, if the Labour members put up with that, then they're going to deserve all that they get. And what that all will be is attrition until the point of enfeeblement beyond recovery. So when Jeremy Corbyn wins, he's going to need to get tough with these people. We cannot, the country cannot accept the leader of the opposition spending all of his time fending off the attempts at coup inside his own ranks, because that means he will not be doing the job that the country is paying him for. Let's hear from Peter Legg on a mobile about these matters. No, Peter, I'm sorry, is going to talk about the Duke of Westminster. Now, let me set the scene before Peter does. The Duke of Westminster was Britain's 3rd richest man. That means to say there are 2 people, presumably men, in Britain who are worth more than £8.3 billion. How remarkable is that? But the Duke of Westminster was the 3rd richest man in Britain because he owned some of the richest parts of the richest city in the country and across the world. He owns Belgravia. And he passed away suddenly from a heart attack, I think, unexpectedly. And he left it all to his eldest son, who's 25 years old and who now inherits £8.3 billion. There were daughters, but the rules of primogeniture in Britain mean that, of course, the Duke of Westminster has to be a man, and therefore the lucky new Duke is now answering to the name of Lucky, and when a suitable period of mourning has elapsed, will begin to enjoy his £8.3 billion fortune. And Peter Legg, who is the head of IHT Planning Matters Limited, a specialist inheritance tax planning consultancy, has agreed very kindly to come on the radio with me and explain how it is that the new Duke of Westminster won't have to be troubled by HMRC, particularly now that his father has gone. Peter, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
How is it that you can inherit that amount of money without a massive tax bill?
Well, there should have been, of course, a tax bill of 3.6. If it was 8-point-something billion, he should have paid 3.6 billion because it's 40%, isn't it? So how he didn't pay could be a number of reasons. But number one, it could be that a lot of the deceased Duke's estate was business property, things like shares in trading companies or maybe agricultural property. He probably had swathes of agricultural.
Yeah, he died on a farm, which he also owned. He didn't only own much of Belgravia and Mayfair.
So farmland is farmland
That's also exempt, is it?
It's exempt. It has to be held for 2 years and occupied for the purpose of agriculture, or it has to be owned for 7 years and other people farm it. So yeah, agricultural property is exempt, 100% exempt, and business property is exempt. So I don't really know what his estate of, but as for the...
Well, just before you go on, Peter, all these properties that he owns in Westminster, they are presumably all let to businesses. Does that count then as business?
No. It's not the right phrase, is it? Because business property sounds like it's a property let to businesses, but business property and business property relief at 100% exemption is shares in a trading company or a business, a partnership or a sole proprietorship. I think the reason he probably is not going to pay any inheritance tax is because previous dukes would have put the asset into trust, so he was a beneficiary of a trust rather than actually owning it. Well, so if you were an exceedingly wealthy person, you didn't necessarily have to give every penny farthing to the next generation, because they would, in such circumstances, have to pay inheritance tax of 40%. So they would set up a trust. So a trust would be where you wanted to benefit your children, so you thought that they may go off the rails, you thought they may get married badly or have a drug problem or a drink problem, or just you wanted to stay in control. So you'd set up a trust, choose your trustees, which would be you, and you transfer it into this trust structure of which your children would be eligible beneficiaries. So you could pay them out income, you could pay them out capital at the trustee's discretion.
But they can. Is there any limit to the proportions of the trust fund that they can enjoy?
No, not really. You can set up a trust for the benefit of one child and just benefit them. So, but there's an entry charge. If you set up a trust, it's what's called a chargeable lifetime transfer for inheritance tax. So there is actually an inheritance tax charge, and the first £325,000, so pretty modest. The first £325,000 would be exempt, and the rest is at 20%. So these trusts must have been set up yonks ago for them to be not trigger any charges to inheritance tax, and I suspect they were. I suspect they've.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose
from one generation to another.
If you're worth £8.3 billion, you can hire very good planners like your good self, and and good lawyers, and that's what they've done. It would appear, yeah.
I think the nobility tend to go to London, big firms of London solicitors, who work for the Queen and their like, and I don't know if I've ever had an £8 billion estate. Not yet. It'll come. It'll come.
You can imagine that people are a bit angry about it. I mean, ordinary people have to pay tax. Ordinary businesses have to pay tax. But the very richest among us, Sir Philip Green, because
Yes.
his businesses are owned by a wife that lives on a yacht in Monte Carlo,
Yes.
where
Yes.
coincidentally they don't pay tax at all. People are pretty mad about this.
Well, I think people get mad about inheritance tax anyway because they think that they've worked all their lives to store up some wealth to pass on to the next generation, their children, only to find that if inheritance tax was at 5% or 10%, nobody would bother about it. But it's 40% is quite a swinging rate of tax on everything you manage to claw together. I think the reason that's not really the proper reaction is that you're not paying it because you're dead. So it's your children are paying. It's a way of redistributing wealth, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, you could say many things about the late Duke of Westminster, and one shouldn't gratuitously speak ill of the recently dead. But having worked all his life is not one of the things you could say about him. He inherited 400 acres from the previous Duke, and the money just rolled in. He didn't actually do any work at all.
Yes. I think there's been a change of attitude, almost a change of conscience in the UK recently, what with, Jimmy Carr and Gary Barlow and Google and Starbucks, all those companies and people that are getting involved in tax planning, as you say, probably on the advice of lawyers or their accountants. And all of a sudden, people seem to be thinking it's not right. Why should these super rich people get away with paying relatively nothing, and we're paying what is our due, what we should pay?
Yeah, and that has its political reverberations. You know, the Panama Papers may be history now, i.e. they were 6 weeks ago or 12 weeks ago, but they will be remembered because it turns out that a caste of people, a class of people in Britain and elsewhere, they get their money here. Some of them earn it, some of them inherit it, some of them get it by dubious means, and it ends up in the Caribbean or in Panama.
What the revenue are now doing is they're bringing in some legislation which is called disclosure of tax avoidance schemes. So they'll look at something, and if the only reason you've done it is to save tax, then they want to look at it. The revenue want to be able to approve that it's not just a tax fiddle. So it's going to be more difficult for these super rich people now to do the sort of tax planning that was done years ago and which continues to be enforced, because they've got to get revenue approval, this disclosure of tax avoidance schemes.
I hear a band playing, Believe It If You Like.
Right.
I mean, I know from nearly 30 years as an MP and also as a private individual how rigorous dealing with the Inland Revenue HMRC can be, how difficult it can be for ordinary people. And then I see these billionaires with in this case, 8.3 billion. They're able to just dance around the HMRC, who appear either unwilling or unable to do very much about it.
There's one exemption that people don't talk about much, and it may well have some relevance to this man. I don't know. I don't know much about him. But you get complete exemption from inheritance tax for what's called killed in war exemption. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be killed in a war. It means that what caused your death was a wound that you suffered during a war. Now, I just wonder, I don't know. Did he fight? No, he didn't.
No,
did he?
not old enough. 63.
And he was territorial, wasn't he? He was territorial army. So it wasn't. It's probably, as I say, that the earlier dukes have wrapped it all up in a trust structure, and until which I don't think they can ever do, the revenue say that trusts don't work and we're going to see through them and they're transparent. I don't think there's going to be more instances of very wealthy people wrapping all their wealth in trusts.
Peter, you've been very helpful. Thanks very much for that. That was Peter Legg, head of IHT Planning Matters Limited, a specialist inheritance tax planning consultancy, on the news that the Duke of Westminster has avoided, miraculously, inheritance tax on his almost £9 billion inheritance.
Big Georgie Galloway's back on the radio! Galloway, celebrate!
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
0844 499 1000. 0844 499 1000. This is the night to have your say on the Labour leadership, on the UKIP leadership, on the Chucky Westminster's tax bonanza, his windfall. £9 billion and not a penny to pay to the taxman. Now that's what you call financial planning. Let's hear from Chris in North Yorkshire. Chris, go ahead, sir.
George, I saw on your Twitter page earlier on that you were trying to get Tom Watson onto your programme.
I tried everything. It was like Muhammad Ali chasing Sonny Liston, the big ugly bear. He just kept on running. I turned up with a net. I turned up with a bowl of honey. I turned up with a tray of pies. I turned up with anything that could possibly entice him. But he kept on running.
Well, to be honest with you, George, I mean, the whole thing is just, for me, so desperate. I mean, these people, these 172 MPs, they're so out of touch with what's going on in the country, and they're so arrogant, and they've become part of a political class that's disengaged from everybody else.
Yeah.
And they're all looking after the interests of big business and banks, and it's kind of like it happened since the Thatcher years, whereby all the parties are more or less morphed into one, and one just carries on the policies from the next one. And for the first time ever, since I think when Neil Kinnock was in charge of the Labour Party, you've got a situation now where you've actually got a Labour Party again that's not trying to resemble the Conservatives, and the establishment. These big business people who are pulling the strings on everything are freaking out because they've had total control of our country through our politicians for the best part of 30, 35 years, and they don't know how to deal with what's going on in the country at the moment. You see, for me, Jeremy Corbyn is just an excuse. This movement of people that are kind of peacefully rising up now and taking to the streets at every single rally that Corbyn goes to around the country.
And they have to be outdoor rallies because there's so many, there's no hall can accommodate them. I can fill halls anywhere, but Jeremy Corbyn's filling whole squares because the halls are not big enough to hold the number of people that want to come and hear him.
But the point I'm trying to make, George, is that the establishment, political and otherwise, the people who are beyond government, who have the real power, who pull all the strings, they kind of think if they disgrace, demean, slag off Jeremy Corbyn and put him down in the eyes of the public, that will be enough. But it's not going to be, because this movement of people have been there. They've been disengaged for decades now. And in Jeremy Corbyn, they've seen an opportunity with which to have their voice heard. And if Jeremy Corbyn doesn't get elected, this movement of people isn't going to go away. There was a man in our pub the other night. He was up on holiday. We live in a small village in North Yorkshire, and it's like a bit of a holiday destination. And this guy owned his own company, and he was calling all these people voting Labour or joining the Labour Party Trotskyists and all the rest of it. And my wife stood at the bar. My wife's very middle. I'm very working class. My wife's very, very middle class. And my wife and her family have always voted Conservative. 7 weeks ago, because of the injustice that's been carried out against Jeremy Corbyn, my wife joined the Labour Party because she has a sense of fairness, and she couldn't stand the undemocratic way that this 172 MPs, backed up by the establishment and the media and everybody else, was treating this man. Because he's
fantastic. What a great story.
But it's the truth, George. And we sat and watched you. Well, we didn't. We listened to you and we watched you on YouTube last night on about the three cheeks of the same backside. You were addressing the Cambridge Union, I think it was.
Yes.
And we laughed our heads off. You see, because people like yourself, people like me, I stood up for a campaign in Redcar against the establishment there. And after 6.5 years of fighting, we won we won in the House of Lords, and we changed the law in the country, and we exposed all kinds of shenanigans and the people in the council and stuff were sort of like rats from a sinking ship. But you see, I went through the mill with that one. I nearly had a nervous breakdown with it because of the rubbish that they levelled at you in the press. And the things that were levelled at me, I've seen them being levelled at Jeremy Corbyn, at yourself. And, I mean, I would never advocate anything that Winston Churchill said, but Winston Churchill once said, to have enemies is good because it shows that you stood up for something that you believe in.
Indeed, he had one or two good speeches, one or two good quotes.
And I'm glad that I've stood up for what I believe in. And I'm glad that Jeremy Corbyn's standing up for what he believes in. And I'm glad that you stood up for what you believe in. Because you see, I don't want to have a country whereby we are ruled, controlled, dictated to by these faceless, nameless people who are just puppets of neoliberalism and big business and banks.
Thank you very much, Chris. A great, great call, and my regards to your wife. Let's take Oscar in London. Oscar.
Hello, George.
Very nice to hear from you. What would you like to say?
Well, I respect you as a man of great knowledge, so I was hoping I might be able to pick your brains a little bit about this. You hear all these terms that are descriptive of people that you would describe as being perhaps of the left, the political left, the far left sometimes. Socialist, communist.
And now
Marxist.
Trotskyist is back.
Yeah, is it Trotskyist or Trotskyite, or are they...
Well, I prefer Trotskyist, but the dictionary gives you the option of Trotskyite. They're both equally fatuous in this context, but they are a relatively new term of abuse. In the past, people like me were called commies, and people used to shout, "Go back to Russia," even though I'd never been there. So Trotskyite or Trotskyist is now the abuse du jour of the mass media and its political class.
Okay, well, I think I tried to look this up on the internet, on the encyclopedias of the internet some time ago, and didn't really sort of get a satisfactory answer. It perhaps was my inability to understand what was written, but I was hoping maybe you might be able to...
Well, Trotsky played a very heroic and noble role in the Bolshevik Revolution of October 1917. He was the leader of the Red Army, which crushed the opposition to the Russian Revolution, and he laid the framework for a Red Army, which then saved the world in the Second World War. So I don't disrespect Trotsky as a person, but his politics were always ultra-left, extreme left, inside the Soviet Union in those days, and then he was driven out of the country into exile and subsequently murdered by Stalin. But his followers, you could always count on, and I go back a long way on these things, you could always count on to propose the most extreme, the most adventurous, the most often sectarian take on politics, on any one political issue. So, putting it crudely, if the rest of us were fighting for a single day of strike action, they'd be demanding 7 days or 21 days. They were always outbidding, outlefting everyone else. And that's one of the reasons why they have never grown at all in Britain, to any significance at all. And I've been using the number 4,000. That's probably a bit of an exaggeration. There definitely will not be 10,000 Trotskyites in the entire country. And there's 600,000 people in the Labour Party. So you can do the maths, Oscar.
Right. Well, yeah, I was hoping to try and get you to pin down what exactly it is that a Trotskyist in the UK in 2016, or what the policies of such a person would be.
Well, they wouldn't.
George Galloway would disagree with, or that that you would oppose.
It would be more. It would be more tactics than policy. So that, for example, I believe in the public ownership of significant sectors. No, by no means all. significant sectors of the British economy, the railways, the utilities. We should have a nationalised bank and so on. But they would demand the public ownership of hundreds of companies, and right now. And they would say, why should we just nationalise a single bank? Why don't we nationalise all the banks? In other words, they would outleft me and outleft Corbyn, and their demands would be more extreme left. And that's one of the reasons why Corbyn is relevant, and they're not relevant. And Jeremy Corbyn, whom I've known for almost 40 years, ain't no Trotskyite, and never, ever has been. It's a calumny, a slander, a lie.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
Talk Radio.
It's the mother of all talk shows, and we've got 1 hour to go. So call me, 0844 499 1000. It's me, George Galloway, on Talk Radio. And we're talking Corbyn, we're talking UKIP, we're talking the Duke.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Well, we already have got you talking. In fact, Talk Radio has made a fantastic start in a very short period of time, and those numbers don't reflect my show, the mother of all talk shows, but the next numbers will, and I promise you, Talk Radio is going to make a bigger and bigger mark. 0844 499 1000.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Now, here's a confession. The Olympic Games leaves me cold. And when I see the BBC spending a fortune of taxpayers' money, sending scores of people to Rio de Janeiro to persuade us that somebody we've never heard of, performing a sport we would never watch, is a hero because they came fifth in the slalom or the synchronized swimming or the beach volleyball, I switch over and switch off. And when, as I know, the Olympic Games are utterly politicized and used oftentimes for propaganda purposes, Brazil is now effectively a dictatorship again, the elected president having been overthrown. I think back to 1936, which was the birthplace of the modern Olympics, when fascist Hitlerite Germany seized the opportunity to demonstrate their dictatorial, authoritarian, racist power. They invented things that we imagine go back to the Olympian Greek times, like people running with a torch and setting fire to a bowl of fire in the ceremony and so on. This had nothing to do with the Greeks. This was invented by Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels. And Avery Brundage, who became the chief of the Olympics for decades, was actually a supporter of Adolf Hitler and Hitlerism. For many, many reasons, it leaves me cold. And when they started adding golf and tennis and all these absurd add-ons that they have made, well, it got even more irrelevant to me. But Matthew Skinner, either because we've sent him there or someone sent him there, is undoubtedly having a wonderful time in Rio, and he's sending back fantastic reports of what's going on there. He's even good enough, almost, to make you interested in the beach volleyball, the male version of the beach volleyball. He's that good. He's a British journalist. He's in Rio. He's on the line, and I'm grateful for that. Matthew, welcome.
Welcome, George. Good evening. How are you?
I'm good, but not much interested in what's going on down there. Try and excite me. What's the best of what you've seen so far?
The best of what I've seen so far, personally speaking, would be the road race, which I went to see. Obviously, we didn't get the result we wanted in that with Froome. But, yeah, that was enjoyable. A beautiful day spent up in the mountains close to here, below Christ, watching the peloton, as it were, ascend there. So I've seen that. I've been down around the beach that you described there, the beach volleyball as well, which has been quite a fantastic experience as well. I'm caught, if I'm honest, in the middle with you. As someone who lives here, there's obviously huge social problems that face the city. So whilst I've been enjoying the Olympics, and it's fantastic to have so many people from around the world visit and interact with the local population and maybe get to understand Rio a little better, at the same time, it's brought huge problems to the city. So
it does everywhere. I mean, that's only Barcelona has actually profited in any way from hosting the Olympic Games. Before it, you get all this puff about legacies, about regeneration, and so on. But everywhere but Barcelona, it ends up a giant white elephant which beggars further the local community. And when I see these pictures of children in the favelas, the slums, peering through gaps in the fence, not a dream of being able to get in to see what their country has paid for, I find it quite demoralizing, Matthew.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, only last night there were more shootings. I believe it's an official day of mourning here in Rio today because a policeman has died. I mean, obviously we don't like to see anybody die, but yeah, a policeman's died overnight after a shootout in a favela, but people are killed by stray bullets here all the time. Obviously a journalist's bus was recently hit by a stray bullet at the Diodora Stadium out in the west of the city. There in the suburbs, it's situated in between two favelas. And so violence is very much part of everyday life here. And as you correctly point out, George, unfortunately, the majority of the population that live in the zona norte, that's over 5 million out of a city of 6.5 million, roughly speaking, they're excluded from the games. They can't afford tickets. They're unable to attend. In fact, to be blunt about it, the only black faces you'll see at the Olympic venues down in Baja will be people that are working there for minimum wage.
Indeed. Another additional negative thought that even in my most negative, I hadn't actually thought of making that point. But the sport itself, what's your take on my no doubt dog in the manger observation that things like golf, for example, how does that become an Olympic sport?
Well, my personal take on the golf, I've actually been to the golf course. I was there at the test event, the opening. Again, not really an accessible sport for the majority of people that live in Brazil.
Well, imagine.
I mean, they want to... Yeah, exactly. They want to grow the game, obviously, which I think effectively means that corporate sponsors wanted the game in the Olympics. So therefore, since they pretty much control the tune of golf as a movement, they put it in the games. There was a lot of clamour from within golf that it should be an amateur tournament for amateurs only, but they decided to go with the professionals. And then obviously we've seen wholesale withdrawals. I mean, my personal opinion as a lover of sports is that since it's not the pinnacle of the golf game, that's the Open, the Masters, the US Open and the US PGA, I don't really see why it's in the game. Same to be said for tennis. Obviously we've got our own Andy Murray, who's a great guy. I'm a huge fan. I love tennis. He wants to win the medal. I'm sure he does, but I think if he was honest, he'd rather have another Grand Slam than a medal. So,
and a Grand Check.
My point. Yeah, exactly. But I think mostly because he's grown up loving the game and because he loves tennis, and that's what you grow up as, I'm sure, as you do as a golfer. You dream of winning, and it, like the Open's been going, I think, for 145 years, so, it's a historic golf tournament, whereas golf, obviously, this is the first Olympics. I do think other sports, I think the rugby sevens has been it's been quite a big success.
Well, my producer is very happy that rugby's there because it's finally a sport that New Zealand can win.
I was just speaking. Yeah, exactly. I was speaking.
Or should have.
Myself.
Or should have.
Yeah, and he was quite disappointed at the amount of silver medals. My best friend here, or one of my best friends here, is also a Kiwi, so he was excited about the rugby and then said it didn't matter after they lost and weren't able to win the gold.
Well, for me, Matthew, there's only one sport, and that's football. But or maybe snooker. I might sneak in snooker. That's not Olympic yet, is it? But at least now we're on the home straight, and people are going to be running in straight lines and in a stadium with some of the fastest people on earth in the actual athletics. If anything's going to grab my attention, it'll be that. How's that looking?
Yeah, well, that started this morning, hasn't it? I think we're first and third in the heptathlon already with Jess Ennis and Kathleen, so that looks good. Obviously, the arrival of the big man himself, Usain Bolt. I think he could, obviously. Is he going
to do it again? Do you think?
I think he's got a great chance, definitely. I mean, I don't really see. Again, it's from a skeptic's point of view. Obviously, I love sport, but again, you're going to see a lot of people line up in that race who've been banned.
Yeah,
doping.
I mean, this is
Usain Bolt,
isn't the Olympic Games just a contest between the drug cheats we haven't caught yet?
Quite possibly so, because again, we've already seen, haven't we, from London and from Beijing in 2008, that people that won medals there have since been stripped of those medals. So, it's obviously very difficult to believe in athletics, given the revelations, given the Russian withdrawals. It does seem very unfair as well. I don't know if you've noticed that, George, that the Russian Paralympians should bear the full force of the IOC, and they've all been banned from taking part.
It's almost beyond parody. They've turfed out of their wheelchairs the Russian disabled athletes en masse as a collective punishment, whilst all these people that have been banned in the past are getting down, ready, steady, go. You couldn't make it up.
Yeah, you couldn't, but again, I guess that comes down, doesn't it? I mean, unfortunately, you would have to look there to corporate sponsors as well, like it or not, there's not as much focus, I guess, on the Paralympics, and so therefore, they feel that they can take their, kind of draconian stance there. But again, it seems very unfair. But I do think there is a palpable sense of excitement about Bolt. He's someone, like in Brazil,
definitely, yeah. I mean, if I watch anything, it'll be the 100 and 200 meter.
The big star, the cracky as they call it here, and he's certainly a huge presence here. People can identify with him as well, given his colour and his success. He's also raced here. I think it was a year ago or 2 years. He did like a kind of celebrity race along the beach, which drew huge crowds. So I think he is a hugely popular figure here.
Yeah.
So,
do the Brazilians do any sports? I mean, obviously, they're the greatest at football. Do they do anything else? Are they winning any medals?
They've won one gold, which is actually quite that's quite an uplifting story. Rafael da Silva, she's from, I don't know if you've seen the film Cidade Today, A City of God, George.
Yes.
She's from that very favela that's located only a few miles from the actual Olympic Park. It was a community that was built in the 60s after they cleared favelas in the more upmarket beachfront areas of Ipanema and Copacabana. They started a community there which has grown over time. And she won a gold medal. She was disqualified and suffered terrible abuse from Brazilians after she was disqualified in 2012. But this week, 2 days ago, she lifted the gold medal. And it was, obviously a time for celebration in a favela. Local residents celebrated. But then unfortunately, after an hour, I think it was maybe 2 hours, normal scene in Brazil, children playing, adults listening to music, drinking, and then a tank rolls in with police, stun grenades, automatic weapon fire, and
wow,
that was how those celebrations were quickly ended within the hour. And unfortunately, that's all too commonplace throughout Rio. I mean, apparently there are more troops on the ground here in Rio at the moment per capita than there were in Iraq during the height of the Bush War, American troops.
My goodness.
Under Bush.
My goodness. Well, look, it's been fascinating talking to you, Matthew. I might not be interested in the Olympics, but I'm definitely interested in talking to you about them, and I'm sure our listeners were. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Olympics. I don't want to appear to be too negative. It's fantastic. Visually, it's stunning. It's just, the juxtaposition of the problems of everyday people here as well makes it difficult to ignore
a tale of two cities. Matthew Skinner, thanks very much indeed. British journalist covering the Olympics and sharing his perspective with us. So, we're now talking about Rio, about UKIP, about Corbyn, and about the Duke of Westminster. So call me, 0844 499 1000.
Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it?
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. If you want to talk to me, you've got about 40 minutes, 50 minutes or so. No, 40. Now, let me deal with some of the tweets and SMS. Leonard Dillon puts it very well. He says, if the Blairites can't have Labour, then nobody will. That's exactly it, They're going to destroy Labour rather than see it fall from their hands. The Order says, George, I voted UKIP for the referendum vote. I was to vote Labour again, but with the backstabbing of Corbyn, I would say, and Owen saying he'd reverse the referendum, I'll never vote Labour again. Well, don't be too hasty on that. Philip Hutchinson says, please, George, we must encourage people to stay in the party and defeat Blairism from within. MSM bangs on. We can't, but we can. Indeed, this is the time to join the Labour Party, not to leave it. Melting Pot says, on a serious note, George, do you really believe that Corbyn will win the general election in 2020? I await your answer. Well, nobody knows who will win the general election in 2020. Labour didn't win the general election in 2015. They didn't win the general election in 2010. So there would be nothing unusual about Labour not winning the general election, because they lost the last two with a Blairite and a Brownite in charge. So why not try something different? What's clear is that Corbyn has built a mass movement in the country that has never been seen before, and I mean never. There has never been a Labour Party remotely the size of the Labour Party that Jeremy Corbyn now leads. And I am, as a public speaker, able to fill halls around the country, but Jeremy Corbyn fills entire public squares. He doesn't speak in halls because there are no halls that could hold the numbers of people who are coming to hear him speak. That's a real phenomenon, and it's one that we have never seen in Britain before. And I was one of the late and great Tony Benn's right-hand men. I travelled around the country with him during his campaign in 1981 to be deputy leader of the Labour Party. I thought that was as good as it gets, as big as it gets. But Corbyn's movement is even bigger than that. Here's Joe in Chapel Hall on the line. Joe, welcome.
Yeah, welcome, George. George, I was born into a family of 9 children in East End of Glasgow. Now our ages range from 81 to 67. We voted Labour staunch all our days, worked for the trade union movements, a lot of years. And up until we saw Ed Miliband and Brown and company walking arm in arm with the Tories at the Scottish referendum, then we had to cease. And we stopped voting Labour. However, since Corbyn has come back, then as a family we're starting to realise, getting back to, here's a man with socialist policies, true Labour policies. But we're getting termed as Trotskyites for this deputy leader Watson.
Yeah.
And the point we're making is who gives him the right to call me or my other brothers and sisters Trotskyites? Who gives him that right? How does he feel that he's got the right to label us as Trotskyites? It's fought all the days for Labour and the trade union movement.
Well, it's a good point. A very good point, Joe. If he'd showed up tonight, I would have asked him that in the bluntest terms, as you can imagine. But these smears and slanders and this mud and lies that has accompanied as a cacophony this whole leadership question, we're now being told, this very night on the radio, we're now being told that that'll start again immediately after this leadership election is over. They're going to do this, Joe, every single year.
Good. Let them bring it on.
It's unbelievable. I mean, there'll be nothing left. It's a scorched earth tactic, isn't it? They're ready to destroy Labour rather than see Corbyn lead it.
Oh, that's true. That's so true.
He's going to need to get tough, Joe. Never mind Trotskyites. They're going to need to bring in some hard men and hard women to knock this thing into shape.
I've told my brothers and sisters that I'm not rejoining the Labour Party. I'll only rejoin the Labour Party the day that you rejoin the Labour Party.
God bless you, Joe. Maybe I will, and maybe I'll be back up in Scotland, in which case I'll look you up. Joe, thanks for that beautiful call. You really touched me there. Andrew is in Ireland. Let's hear from him.
How are you, George?
I'm good.
Yes, I wish I could vote for the Labour Party in the north of Ireland.
Yes.
Nicola Sturgeon always thinks that they have no say in the UK elections. At least Scotland can vote Labour.
Yes, it is. It's a historical situation that I don't think is ever going to change, Andrew, because the historic position of the Labour Party is that the north of Ireland is a part of Ireland, and therefore Irish parties should contend for power there. What do you say?
Yeah, I agree with that. But I wish, if we could have something like that, which could represent like all of Ireland and could be.
Well, there's quite a lot of left wingers getting elected now in the Irish Parliament and in the Assembly in the north. I see that Eamon McCann was recently elected.
Oh, People Before Profit. Yeah, that's a good party, but the only problem is it doesn't stand in my constituency. So I'd like it to come to the east of the island.
Anyway, tell me what's your take on what's happening?
Yes, your Blairite that was on earlier rather contradicted himself, didn't he? First he said that there was less than 4,000 Trotskyites.
Yeah, and then that they were flooding. They were flooding the Labour Party.
I know, yeah, it's ridiculous.
Some flood.
And then also another point that he made is he said about they had 6 months. They had to be members for 6 months before they could vote. Well, last time out in the last election last year, people could vote within having only been members for just over a month. They were allowed to fly up until August the 12th, 2015.
They're just making it up as they go along, Andrew.
I know it is.
I mean, somebody's just pointed out to me it was in the small print, but that's just untrue. There was no small print. They took the decision to retrospectively ban all these people at a meeting that had been running for 7 hours when most of the people had left it. They made it up on the day, on the hour.
I know it's incredible. I just couldn't believe what Tom Watson said on Twitter earlier whenever he had to defend himself, and he had the cheek to say, "I think we should be able to get it back in cost." He's not going to pay anyone a damn penny, so he isn't.
It's unbelievable. Andrew, thanks. Great call. Lovely to hear your voice, and don't be a stranger. Call back. I want to go to Peter in Stroud.
Oh, hello there, George.
Hi there. Go ahead, Peter.
Hi there. The state of the Labour Party at the moment is pretty worrying at the minute.
It is.
I believe that Jeremy Corbyn will get re-elected, but the people he's been put up against are kind of lightweights or middle hitters.
Yeah.
You know, they're not the...
No, they're a cipher. They're a cipher for
yeah.
something else, aren't they?
I'd never heard of them before they decided they would have a pot of leadership.
I sat in Parliament with Owen Smith, and I wouldn't have known him if he'd come and sat on my lap. I'd never heard of him or set eyes on him before, and I was in Parliament at the same time as him.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's quite interesting. In the media just now, we're hearing quite a lot from Alistair Campbell and your John McTernan. So they've never actually been elected to anything. They've been advisors and so on. But what I thought was pretty shocking was in the Telegraph this week, John McTernan wrote an article saying that the Tory party should smash the RMT over these strikes in the Southern Rail, which, frankly, is a preposterous proposition for a Labour supporter of any sort.
That was certainly startling, I must confess, even though John McTernan is on the right of the Labour Party. I've never, I think, seen anyone in the Labour Party from any wing call for a Tory government to smash a trade union, one that is actually affiliated to the Labour Party. In this case, the ASLEF and the TSSA are both historic affiliates of the Labour Party. So it was startling, to say the least. Peter, that's not a Stroud accent you've got. Are you Scottish?
Not at all. Yeah. I'm a Glaswegian.
Excellent. I like the way that even when Scottish people move south, Stroud is pretty far south, you can still tell that they're from the old country. It's George Galloway. It's the mother of all talk shows.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now, somebody called Mark says, it's funny that when Corbyn goes to court for a decision, it's okay, and anyone else, it's wrong. But Corbyn hasn't gone to court for a decision. Corbyn's not been in court. He's never brought anything to court. Mark, you're talking out of your backside. And Sparkle60 says he needs to have candidates in place ready to take over from the plotters. Properly vetted, credible candidates. Yep, absolutely. Harry says, I never thought this could happen. One of the judges in the Court of Appeal today is a close associate of Blair. Crazy. Well, I don't know if he's a close associate. He's definitely a Blair insider. He was only one of a panel of three, so we shouldn't overemphasize it. But I'm not sure that a judge who was a Blair insider really should have been presiding over that case today. If it had been me, I would have recused myself. The lucky new Duke has just lost his father. I expect he and his family are all devastated. Indeed, Ken Small, you're correct. And so due solemnity should accompany my statement that whilst sadness no doubt reigns in the castles of the Duke of Westminster, the fact that he's not going to be paying any tax at all on his £9 billion inheritance may be some small consolation. Get it? Nathaniel is in Dover. We better hear from him. Nathaniel, welcome.
Good morning. Good morning.
Well,
good evening, George.
It feels like good morning to me.
It's been a long day. It's been a very long day, George. Tell me about it. I've rejoined Labour back in September last year when it all started to kick up with a new Labour leadership election. To be honest with you, I had absolutely zero interest. I walked away from Labour back in when Ed Miliband took up because, you know what, they're Tories in their times. I mean, they don't give a toss if they lose an election because at the end of the day, they're going for the same policies that May's government are going for. Yeah. So, of course, they're going to try and destabilise what Corbyn's trying to do because then they can keep their £70,000 salaries. They don't give a monkeys if they win or lose an election. But I'm getting sick and tired also of the unions trying to influence the blooming vote for this leadership election. I'm absolutely sick and tired of it to the point that I actually rescinded my union membership, just out of pure principle. I pay for my workers' right to be protected, not to be told how to vote. Is the bottom line on that, to be perfectly honest. And you know what, George, we need more people like you back in the Labour Party, to be honest with you, because you speak your mind. You're not afraid to beat around the bush, mate. You know, people like you are needed in and around there.
Well,
you know,
I certainly would strengthen the side, and Scotland is the obvious place to send me. He should make me the shadow Secretary of State for Scotland. I'd be ready to take that position. Nathaniel, thanks a lot, my friend. Let's go to Scotland and hear from Grant in Alloa. Go ahead, Grant.
Hi there, George.
Hi.
Good to be back on. Can I just say, by the way, there's been some cracking calls on the night, some really, really good calls.
It's been fantastic. Yeah, it's been a great show.
And what I was looking to talk about is we keep on hearing this word, George, electability, from Owen Smith's side, and this obsession that he can somehow gain power back for Labour.
Yeah, he's got a pretty checkered history on electability himself, actually.
Yeah, exactly. He lost an election, I'm sure, in Wales.
He did.
But what I was going to say...
He managed to lose a South Wales constituency for Labour. It's not easy to do that.
If Owen Smith is so electable and the millions of Labour voters want him in, why have they not registered in their £25 vote? Why have they not registered to come and save the Labour Party? And I say that with inverted commas, George.
Yeah.
I mean, for them to claim that he is electable when it looks pretty obvious that he can't even get elected in his own party is absolutely ludicrous.
Whereas last night, Nicola Sturgeon's own father, standing for the SNP, was defeated by a pro-Corbyn Labour Party in Irvine.
Exactly.
Labour took a seat off the SNP just last night.
Exactly. It's a great result for us. I think eventually Scotland will come round. If I'm being honest, George, I think Scotland might be lost for quite a while to come yet, but we are building inroads, you could say. I do consistently hear from my friends who are nationalists. They say, we like Corbyn, but can we trust the Labour Party when they look at all the people still in the kind of... Well, you look at the elites within the Labour Party, they don't trust them, but they like the ideas that Corbyn's putting across.
I mean, that's a legitimate question. You would have to say that it's legitimate to question whether Corbyn's going to last the course. Are they going to finally, by one means or another, destroy his leadership? That's a legitimate question. But I think the result that I referred to in Irvine yesterday indicates that Scotland is at peak Sturgeon, that the SNP are very strong, but they'll never get stronger than this. And their appeal is beginning now to degrade. And the endless obsession with referendums and breakaways and a hard border between Scotland and England, which would, of course, have to be if Scotland left and did succeed in joining the EU. There would have to be a hard border with England, with customs posts and all of that. I'm not sure that the SNP aren't beginning to lose their lustre a bit, Grant.
Yeah, well, what I tend to find, George, just now is there's a lot of good left-wingers within the SNP that are getting fed up just now because, I think you've noticed yourself, they talk left and they act the very opposite, they act right.
Exactly.
And I think that eventually these people will see that the Labour Party is going back to kind of, good old traditional...
Yeah, if it's a real Labour Party, but that needs change. That needs change. Grant, a pleasure, as always, talking to you. Thanks very much indeed. You've only got about 15 minutes max to call me, 0844 499 1000. Let's hear from Sue on Twitter. She says, Theresa May's greatest achievements will be Tom Watson, and good luck to them. Persistent Pete says, communists left a mark in standing up to imperialism. That's why they think anyone against imperialism is a commie. Good point. Levi Jordan says Corbyn could win a general election and these snakes would still protest his inabilities as a leader. And Louis says there's no way Mrs. May will win an election. Maybe you should stop watching the BBC. I'm not sure if that's aimed at me or someone else. Mickey says, Corbyn already done that. When your team don't follow you, you do the honourable thing. He didn't self-interest. I really don't understand what that means. Here's the facts. Jeremy Corbyn won a landslide election victory, and from the day and hour that he was elected, within 15 minutes of his election, the first of the defectors issued a public statement that they were leaving the shadow government, they were leaving the front bench, and began what has turned into a torrent of subversion and treachery on all platforms. Once upon a time, in the lobbies, you would always find people briefing against other people, and they never even had the courage to put their names to it. Now, such is the level of treachery that the whole country knows who these traitors are, because they are openly going on television, going on radio, in Parliament. They're shouting abuse at their own leader, telling him to shut up and sit down. They're on TV on the hour, every news bulletin. They're on all social media platforms, and when you speak back to them, you're accused of bullying and misogyny. I mean, you really couldn't make this up. London Blessed says they know they lost their grip on the party, and so they're trying to damage anything they can on their way out. And Nathaniel Richards, I don't know if that's a different Nathaniel to the one we spoke to, I attribute them to the baddies who blew up their evil lair and escaped the hero in a submarine. Dr. Evil. Gary says, if there's witch hunts on the left, these right-wing saboteurs need to be dealt with. Well, that's undoubtedly true. Liam says, Owen Smith is saying Corbyn is unelectable. He doesn't even say why he thinks that. Just a backstabber. That's all.
Listener comrades of the world, unite!
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
That's been a great show tonight. It felt like old times to me. I hope it has to you. Paddy McIntyre says it's a crazy time in politics, but Corbyn has got it sussed. He just keeps it honest, and people aren't stupid. Indeed, they're not. Thanks for that. Derek's in Rochdale. Let's hear from him. Derek, go ahead.
Just wanted to say, the more I watch and the more I listen and the more I read the mainstream media on the Labour leadership election, the stronger my resolve becomes to continue my support for Jeremy Corbyn.
Excellent. It has been quite unprecedented level. I mean, I've lived through many of these things, Derek. I've, of course, had a witch hunt or two myself, but I've lived through the witch hunt against Mr. Benn, against Mr. Scargill, against Ken Livingstone. But this is on a wholly new level, because this is the leader of the opposition that we're talking about. There is no lie, no smear, no tactic so base that it will not be used to try and unhorse a good and honest man. That's all Corbyn is. He's not a communist, a Trotskyist, a Marxist, or any other kind of ist. He's just a good and honest man.
And it's been stated many times that the mainstream media are determined to discredit Jeremy Corbyn in any way they can. But I still think they've got some tricks up the sleeve, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know when they'll do it. But these people are sore losers, and they've tried the anti-Semitic smearing, and they throw anything they can to make people think, there's something wrong here. But I find it all laughable. All of it. I'm watching that Victoria Derbyshire show this morning, BBC, and they're doing the hustings, I believe, on that show, on the next Labour Party debate, and they put a photograph up of Owen Smith clenching his fists, gritting his teeth, but the photograph of Jeremy Corbyn was a man. They selected it. He looks aloof and distant, and they're playing little games with our...
The BBC has been the worst. The Guardian has been the second worst. It is unremitting. It is Gobellian. It is a shame and a disgrace on anyone who calls themselves a journalist or a broadcaster. All rules have been thrown to the wind. All norms, all journalistic norms have been abandoned. It is open season on a good and honest man. It fills me with disgust.
Yep, I agree, and I believe many of us are seeing right through it for what it is. It's shoddy, as you say, terrible journalism. I could do better myself, and I'm pretty sure I could. But did you ever find Wally, by the way? Because I've not been listening to everything all night, but I believe Wally has been hanging around Red Lion Court in London.
Well, I wouldn't go into his private life, but Wally has at least given an excuse for not coming tonight, namely that he's speaking at a conference elsewhere. But the big ugly bear, Tom Watson, he didn't even reply, even though hundreds of people tweeted him directly today, encouraging him to accept my invitation to come on the show tonight. And as I said at the beginning, I have a long and comradely relationship with Tom Watson, and the text messages to prove it over several years. So he would have got a fair chance with me tonight. I would have been prepared to listen to the argument he has to make that this is all a Trotskyite twist. I would have given him plenty of time to explain why, but he didn't have the guts to show up or even to decline to show up. And he's the deputy leader of the Labour Party, I remind you.
Yep. Well, I'm ashamed to say I voted for that guy.
I couldn't vote for him, Derek, but I twisted the arm of my entire family to vote for him. That's why I'm so angry at him.
Yeah, I thought he was more a credible man than that when I watched him in the past in some of these committees on Parliament, and I thought, that guy standing.
He done a good job on the phone hacking.
Yep.
I thought he was a working class guy, that he was a union man. I knew that he had some policy positions that I profoundly disagreed with, but I was convinced he was the right man. And he, no sooner was he in, and he was undermining the person who was his leader. You can't have a deputy leader like that.
No, there'll have to be some big changes, I guess, if it can be done, but we'll have to see. But I still think Jeremy's in front. I still believe a lot of people are seeing through all this rhetoric, this smearing. At least I hope they are.
Well, that's important, Derek.
Rather than the deflection. But I know I don't get long to talk to you, but in terms of the hustings, I was just looking at the two people who have chaired these online discussions, and we've all often said that Jeremy gets don't get a fair crack at the whip. Would you know who picks these people? And I mean, for instance, it was Sophie Ridge.
Yeah, from Sky.
From Sky, who we presume would be anti-Corbyn. Catherine Happ-Jones, who I don't know, but she's still from the main media. I think they both did okay. They seem fairly balanced, but who's coming up next? Alistair Campbell, is he going to do one?
No, they do it all from behind. This entire coup has been coordinated from the start by Tony Blair, Peter Mandelson and Alistair Campbell. They are the evil geniuses behind it all. They're the people that open the doors for the money that's funding it. Who's paying for Owen Smith's campaign? I want to know that. Who's paying?
Well, you'll have to get him on and to put that to him, but as we know, he won't come on.
No. Where's Wally? Where's Wally?
He's in Red Lion Court, I think, or that area.
Okay.
Getting his instructions and his attack lines for the hustings to improve his standing.
All right. I'll drive by Red Lion Court just to see how insalubrious a quarter it turns out to be. But I'll take your word for it. Derek in Rochdale, many, many thanks for that. We're finding out, I think, on the show tonight that it isn't working. And this is a big blow for them, you see. They thought they could do all this without an election. They thought they could force Corbyn to chuck it, to say, look, it's insurmountable. It's too big a problem. I'm 67, they thought he'd say. I can't be doing with this. It's going to put me in my grave, this constant backstabbing and subversion. They hoped that they'd force Corbyn out without a vote being cast. Then they hoped that they could challenge him and rule him off the ballot paper. They really, really thought that. They thought that the leader of the Labour Party could be turfed out in an election by keeping him off the ballot paper. And then that failed. And so their attention now has turned to ballot rigging. That's what this is. It's nothing more or less than ballot rigging. They said there's 130,000 people joined the Labour Party after Corbyn's victory. It's quite likely that the overwhelming majority of them will vote for Corbyn again. So let's invent a backdated, retrospective, 6-month rule that rules every last one of them out. Then they were told, well, there's a legal problem with that because these people were told when they joined that they had the right to vote in leadership elections. So they came up with the wheeze of a 48-hour window in which anybody at all could join, never mind the people that had been in 6 months. Anybody at all could join if they paid 25 quid, an 800% increase in the fee that some of them, 130,000 of them, had already paid. Then they discovered that a gigantic number of people paid the 25 quid, making Labour 50 million quid up in membership fees alone. And so they started weeding through those £25 members, and when they discovered that you once had said the word Blairite, they called themselves Blairites, but if you called them a Blairite on social media, that was enough to have you ruled out. And then this 130,000 people got justice in the High Court earlier this week, only to be confounded by 3 High Court judges this afternoon. Let me see if there's anything I haven't told you. Right Judge Lamb says the SNP exposed themselves as neoliberals. And Kim says maybe Scots will see there's little point having SNP MPs in Westminster as they can't win a majority. And here's an SMS. As a Tory, I'm very excited by Corbyn, genuinely. A real man with real ideas who tries to represent the working class. Let's get a patriot conservative leader and have some actual democracy, not 3 cheeks. Well, that's a very interesting one, but unfortunately there's no name on it. Faria Hines says the media continually publishes polls showing Corbyn's unpopularity, yet the reality is that people love him. It's not Faria, it's Farla. Farla, you've got to grasp this point. Opinion polls are more a device for influencing public opinion, altering public opinion, than they are measuring public opinion. That's the truth of it. Fazeli says real enemies are the Tories. I wish people would remember that instead of indulging in infighting. Well, it's been marvellous for me. I hope it was for you. The 3 hours simply sped by. And God willing, I'll be back here in the same place at the same time next week for the mother of all talk shows. You can catch me at the Chichester Festival on Tuesday if you're of a mind, and several other places too. Follow me on Twitter and you'll know exactly where I'm going and where we can meet up. Until then, stay tuned to Talk Radio and the great Ian Lee, who's up right after me. I've really enjoyed it. We've talked Tories, UKIP, Dukes and the Olympic Games.
Join the Talk Nation.
Dial up and talk radio.
We'll get you talking.